I'm just saying that, that data, when you look at data, I think as Thea said, you can look at it from many different perspectives. But it is clear that our manufacturing has increased. And I'd like you to speak to a little bit to what is that just a result of more people are going into manufacturing? Is it a result of innovation? Is it a result of modernizing? Are we seeing the jobs, you talked about the jobs being high paying in the manufacturing industry, and one of the things that Theo was concerned about is the quality of jobs. And so you can talk a little bit, maybe correlating how these jobs may be addressing some of those issues?
Right. That's a big question, Nicole. What has been spurring the really growth in manufacturing? I think you almost have to go back to World War II. The United States was the leading manufacturing country, still standing, and we really kept booming after that period and really dominated global trade flows until about the 60s, when Japan, Germany, and other major industrial countries came back fully online and gave us a lot more competition. And then you see countries, Mexico and others, and then of course China and many of the Asian countries. Throughout it all, manufacturing in the United States has largely been on an upward trajectory, except when we have great economic shocks globally in the United States. It's a bigger issue than just trade. Growth in manufacturing has been driven in substantial part by productivity growth. We are able to produce more. Now this has had impacts on the labor side, because it takes a lot fewer workers to produce more today than it did before. But some of the gains we've seen, as I said, have been on the manufacturing compensation side, particularly in a lot of industries, and you see the skills required to be grown. Right now we actually see something of a big skills gap in the United States, jobs that are unfilled in manufacturing because we need higher level skills. Both from the technology side, which certainly has played a huge role in manufacturing growth, but also in good old welders and things like that. And as we look at the baby boom generation retiring, there are some really large estimates about the types of openings that we're going to need to fill in the manufacturing sector in the United States to be competitive. But when you look at those charts, and you're right, and I've got lots of stories about companies if you want to go down that route too, but I think it is useful to level set, because there are so many questions about, well, what does America manufacture? The growth in exports, the growth in globalization has been a big part of that. America has quadrupled our manufactured goods exports. As we've quadrupled our output, but we aren't at the largest share. We aren't the largest manufacturing exporter that we once were in the post-war period. We have a lot more competition, and so how are we going to solve that? I think trade deficit, trade surplus numbers are sometimes difficult. They're broad-based. I think some of the sectoral numbers oftentimes are better. But I will just say, the United States has a manufacturing trade surplus with the 20 countries with whom we have free trade agreements. So if you want to look at that as a measure, we have been able to succeed on that when markets are open, when standards are higher, and that's really what we're looking at when we look at the TPP. Europe just finalized its trade agreement with Vietnam. It's got negotiations ongoing with the ASEAN countries. We know what happened, and we've got real stories about what happened when they completed their trade agreement with Korea before us. We have small manufacturers who lost their market and only were able to increase sales, or actually continue to make sales, after the U.S. put the Korea Free Trade Agreement in place. We're in a lot of competition around the world, and the status quo is not going to work. We've got to compete to win.
Great. Thank you. Okay.